Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Luthier from Pavison Games. Luthier is a 1-4 player, worker placement, blind bidding Euro game with a whole lot of things as you try to satisfy various patrons, build various instruments, repair various instruments, and put on performances across 6 rounds of play. That's a lot to unpack there. We'll get into some of it, not all of it. But first, usual notes over here. This is a prototype, rules, and components of exchange, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Now with that, let's dive a bit into all those things I said, because there are a lot of buzzwords and not a whole lot of actual explanation going on. I will say, I will not be doing a full rules overview because, well, that would be a lot of intricate things of how they all weave together that I don't want to get into, but we will dive into a general idea of how this game plays. Across 6 rounds of play, you're trying to get as many points as possible. You're going to get points for a few different things in the game, but a good starting basis is making your patrons happy. There's going to be all these patrons over here, which let's put out some more patrons over here. There's some patrons over here that you're trying to acquire and make them happy by doing the various things they want that we'll come back to. That's going to give you points. You're also trying to get various sections over here of the first chair of the orchestra, having a little bit of an area control puzzle over here in the center. That's going to get you points too. Repairing various instruments, that's going to get you points as well. Building various instruments, that's going to get you points. Putting on performances sometimes gets you points, other times gets you area control. A lot of these things all to come together to get you points. But if you are teaching the game for the first time or you're diving into the first time, a good starting point is literally just telling people, here's what the patrons want, work on making them happy, and the rest will kind of come together, and across multiple plays you'll have a good sense of how the strategy plays out. So in other words, you want points. Prestige is the term in this game. You want prestige in the game across those 6 rounds of play. Now the core mechanism is going to be a worker placement, but blind bidding worker placement. You see, you start the game with your 1, 3, and your 5. Let me see where my tokens currently are over here. We have, nope, not that one. They must be on the board. We have 5, 1, 3. We have our 1, 3, and a 5 that you're going to start the game with. Now across the course of play, you'll get your 2 and a 4. Specifically, when you move from round 2 to round 3, you're going to unlock your 2. When you move from round 4 to round 5, you'll unlock your 4, which will give you 5 workers you can place out every round instead of 3. There's also special workers. We may or may not get to those. But you have your 1, 3, and your 5. You're going to take those workers. You can put them down, face down onto various locations. So I'm looking at them over here, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and put the token down over here, face down. You can't see it. Well, you can see the token, but you can't see what it is. Meanwhile, the other player is going to go ahead and grab their token, and they'll put it face down over here, but they'll go ahead and add an assistant to that. So we have assistants, which you can take, and you can add them to your character over here, which adds to the value. So that's going to give some degree of information away, but it also boosts their value, and a higher value doesn't just mean you go first, it also means you have a stronger action you can take, depending on, well, the spot, the thing, all of that. But basically, you're going to want to buff your workers with your assistants to be able to get extra bonuses out of the placement. That's the core idea of the placement. Now, we'll go through a few more placements just because I think it'll help to show you a resolution. But over here, let's go ahead and take this 3, and let's put this 3 down over here. And then, you know what? We're actually going to have them take their 5 and put their 5 down on top of there, because that one spot having a few workers on it will give you a good idea of some of the worker resolution. Now, you're going to do that. You're going to place all your workers using that blind bidding and or with the assistants until you've placed your 3 workers at the start of the game, 4 as the round moves on, and then 5 towards the end of the game. And you're going to place those workers out on a variety of locations. You're going to have here, 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 and here. You're going to have here, and then you're going to have 2 spots on your personal board. So a bunch of things you can do. Let me go ahead and move this up a drop. Just move this up over here. These 2 spots on your personal board, which are going to be helpful for finishing off your instruments. So you have 4 types of cards you're competing for. You have first player and a few bonuses you're going to get over here. And then you have building instruments on your personal board. That's where you're going to be trying to go. There's also a marketplace action. Again, we'll get back to that. Now, when you resolve a spot, after you've done placing all these things, starting with the first player, you're going to pick a spot that you have at least one of your tokens at. The only requirement is you have to be present at that spot. It could be your own board, or it could be a shared spot on the main board, and you're going to resolve that spot. But the tricky part is you're going to resolve that spot for everyone. Meaning when you resolve a spot, you might be messing with other players' choice of how they wanted things resolved because of the fact that, well, they wanted to resolve things in a certain order to get some resources first or to do whatever, but you've just determined for them that that spot is resolving. Now, for the sake of this, very often in the game, you won't necessarily have that much competition, especially at the beginning of the game. A 4-player game, you'll have a lot more, but at 2 or 3 player counts, it's easy to not have that much competing going on. But as the game progresses, you're going to have more and more competition going on because of the added workers you have in the game. But let's take a simple spot and resolve that, because a simple spot, well, you know, just one worker, no complexity here. We're going to flip this over and resolve that single spot. So So I'm going to take that. We'll move this down to our board. There's nothing really to do. You don't actually need to use this. When you have a single spot, just have that one person resolve it, and they can choose one of these cards to take over here. The rightmost card is free. Other cards are going to cost more. They cost a combination of coins and inspiration, although if you've moved up these tracks, you can unlock the level 2 and the level 3 spots without having to pay for them once your token has gotten that far. So that will help you over there, but past that, on every one of these spots in the game, there's going to be a free spot, which is always the rightmost here, and the leftmost here, and then the spots you have to pay more for as you move inwards over there. So you can take that card. This is going to be a patron. The patron is going to get added to your board, and the patron, there's also going to be a bonus you get when you take the patron, but now this is going to give you something that you're trying to do in the game, something that you're trying to fulfill their requirements and their goals. There's a lot of iconography on that card. Don't worry about it for right now. We'll come back to it. But ultimately know that your patrons want to have their goals satisfied. That's the main purpose that they serve. That's going to be the basic spot over here. That's going to be the patron spot over here. You are going to get a fallback bonus, and we're not going to go through all of these, but generally there's always a main goal of what you're going for, as well as a fallback goal, which sometimes is the thing you want, and other times it's someone else took the thing you want, and now you have that fallback. In this case, it's take an assistant and 2 inspiration. Over here we have 3 white cubes, 2 metal cubes, sorry, 1 metal cube, and 2 wood cubes. And that's the tier, by the way. The animal cubes, which are the white cubes, represent like horsehair and things like that. Those are the most common. Then we have wood, which will be a little less common, and then we have the metal, which is the least common in the game. And all these fallback actions will give you that. This one will just give you an assistant and 2 inspiration. Additionally, and this is important, when you place a 4 or higher over here, as we did, we had a 5, you can go ahead and take the bonus action. That's going to be true in all spots over here. They all have a bonus action. The bonus action here is resetting the patron cube, which, without getting too much into it, know that your patrons want things done. Every single round, this little cube is going to tick along, giving you bonuses, but if it ever gets to the end, they're going to leave because they haven't had their goals fulfilled. Now, you can stop them by either temporarily fulfilling their goals, meaning if they have multiple goals, then you can fulfill them slowly and that'll reset the cube, or you can fulfill them completely, in which case, good job, or you can go ahead and reset them using the spot over here. You can reset them to the beginning of the track, which will buy you a little time. That's a reason to place a higher number here, other than just going first. So that's going to be the patron action over here. This is how you get patrons whose goals you are ultimately trying to fulfill. How do you fulfill these goals? This is where we're going to take a break. There's a lot going on in this game. This is where we're going to take a break from the rest of what's going on over here and talk about the patrons for a second. Patrons ultimately have a core thing that they want. They want you to build an instrument of a specific type. That type's illustrated in the top corner of those instruments. That's the main thing they want over there. The other thing that they sometimes want, but not always, sometimes you have a patron who just wants one thing, like Cassini over here. She just wants a single instrument, which is over here. Build that and her goals are satisfied. Not that it's easy to build an instrument, mind you, but hey, progress, we're getting there. There's also secondary goals over here. Secondary goals are either one of 3 things, either building other instruments, and every time you see a line, you're going to have a little more flexibility in the secondary goals. You either build another instrument, you repair an instrument, which is a little easier to get done, or you do a performance in that particular patron's lineage or their type, their mode, whatever that, I'm forgetting the terminology, but you do a performance in their field or whatnot. Those are going to be the 3 things you can do to fulfill secondary goals. So whenever you do those things, and once you've done all those things, you're going to flip over the patron, and you'll get their one-time award over here. That's this little yellow bar. You'll get the ongoing award, which is actually on the other side. This is just showing what you unlock. You'll have an ongoing award. You'll tuck it, and you have that top part of the board, which is going to give you an ongoing award, a benefit of things that you do. Whenever you do that thing, you get more money. You have a lower cost, stuff like that in the game. And then the bottom part of the track, that's going to be the cubes you get every single round. So these cubes over here, as your cube moves around, you get those bonuses, 5 money, then 3 money for having this patron just on your board. So again, quick recap of patrons. When you get them, they will give you a bonus. Every round until they leave, they'll give you a bonus. They want specific goals. When you fulfill those goals, which require fulfilling an instrument, and then other things possibly, you'll get a one-time 7 prestige. You'll move up in the reputation track, and that's all variable depending on the patron or the amounts you get over there. And then you'll flip it over and get an ongoing benefit. And if you're like, that's a lot of information, that's only one action, yes. Yes, it is. Moving on from there, well, what else can we do over here? So down here we have performances. You'll remember performances are one of the ways that you can accomplish the secondary goals. Swayton over here would want a performance done that would count towards one of his 2 secondary goals, which would be excellent because you can get that done over there. Performances, you're going to go over here. You're going to take the number that you put there. So let's say you had a 1 over here. Let's take our 5 over here. You're also going to roll the dice. So you're going to roll 2 white dice. We're going to add the pips over here. So that's going to be 1 pip. That's no pips. That's 3 pips over here. Just count the little dot dotted notes over there, and you're going to add those notes to your number. In this case, this would be a roll of 8. 5 plus 0 plus 3 is 8. You're going to look at the performance metric over here. You could give up inspiration to add more to that number over there. There's also options to roll better dice or re-rolls on this track, and then you'll get the performance in one of 3 options. The lowest option is just a one-time reward of money. The second option is going to give you a little less money, but also gives you the ability to place a token down onto these rows over here in the specific section that you did performance in, which will give you various bonuses. And the third option will usually give you points, although sometimes the second option will give you points as well. So you're doing a performance that is going to give you a one-time benefit of money, some points, and then also placement on this area control puzzle, but then possibly also fulfilling your patron's goals. So a lot of the good things happening there. Additionally, when you place a 4+ over here, you can move up this track, which will give you over here, these are rerolls. These give you better dice. Instead of the white dice, you get black dice. When you get to the top, you just get 2 points. And over here, you get a custom worker. Now, we're not going to get too much into these, but over here, here, and over here are ways to unlock custom workers in the game. And a custom worker means you go ahead through this pile of cards over here, you pick one of these cards, it's always going to be 1 plus the number of players, you look at them, I don't know why I shuffle them, you look at them, you decide which benefit is best for you, you place it down, and that's going to replace one of your workers with a new worker that maintains the same number, but does give you an ongoing ability as well, which lets you get more done. Most of the things in the game are going to let you get more done. That's going to be how you do performances. Then we have instruments. Instruments are over here. This is the main thing your patrons want you to do in order for them to be fulfilled, which is going to be a key thing of how you do, well, everything in the game. So how do instruments work? Well, you get them the same way we've talked about everything else. You simply put a cube down over here, a disc down, you take back a person. Over here, the bonus over here is going to get a material of any choice, plus you can go ahead and rough an instrument, which we haven't fully gotten into, but basically instruments have to go through a few phases. When you get an instrument, it's going to go down over here, and then from here, you can go ahead and rough it, which means you'll move it over here, and then over here, you'll finish it. Each time paying costs. Over here, there's a whole roughing cost on this side. Over here, there's a finishing cost. Once it's finished, you'll get the prestige over here. But then also, that's when and where it can count towards your patrons, who ultimately always need an instrument filled. You'll also take one of your tokens at that point, look for the specific name of the instrument, and then put down a marker onto that matching instrument, which, by the way, that's not the right one. I just put it down anywhere. But you're going to find the matching instrument, put it down over here, and get the first share bonuses. And again, this is a little area control puzzle. So instruments are very important, but they go through multiple phases of what you have to do before you can actually go ahead and, well, get all the fun stuff out of them. That's going to be instruments, which brings us to the next thing over here, which is going to be a repair. Repair over here is more of a one-time ongoing thing where you simply, well, I said one-time ongoing. That is not compatible terminology. It's either one-time or it's ongoing. It's a one-time thing. You immediately pay cubes in, pay those resources, and you repair an instrument. When you repair an instrument, you pay the cost down here. You're going to get the prestige here, which is a lower amount, but then you also get to go ahead and take a token and put the token out onto the row of the instrument you prepared. So for example, if I prepare this instrument, I can go ahead and put it on the bottom row, and I'm going to go ahead and put it over here, which won't give me anything right now because I'm tied for first year. But if I can overtake red over there, I'll get the bonus for first year. In general, finishing an instrument's kind of a big deal. That's going to lock you in on first year. The other areas, doing performances or repairing instruments, are not as locked in, and so you can change hands a little bit more on those as you place them out. That's going to be how you repair an instrument, but then one more thing, the instruments, when you repair them, they can count towards a patron's needs. When a patron has secondary goals, repairing a matching instrument of that secondary goal will count, and you can go ahead and take that card. This is not actually matching, but you can take that card, tuck it underneath, and fulfill the secondary goals. So just like performances, you have a second thing you're doing. Also, when you place a 4+, you're moving up this track over here. This track is one that you're going to get that extra worker option over here, but additionally, you have various bonuses that relate down to your personal board, so let's talk about that first. I know I told you I'm not going to tell you everything. I'm telling you much more than I thought I was planning on, but I'll try to wrap it up quickly, just to give you a good idea of how everything plays. So, to that end, down over here on your personal board, you have these spots over here where you can place down things in order to rough instruments and to finish them. The basic idea here is by placing a token down, let's find one of our tokens over here, by placing a token down, once again, depending on the tier, you get various bonuses. I will not go into those now, but you can go ahead and pay the cost. So again, if this instrument were over here, you can pay the cost, in this case 3 wooden cubes, and move it to the side. If you take the same action at a different point later, you can go ahead and take this cost and then pay the cost on the left side and finish that instrument, which again is going to be very helpful for you. That's the basic idea. It's actually pretty straightforward as far as how that operates, past the little bonuses you get. What you should know is back to this track, when this track slowly moves up, you're getting a few things. Over here, this gives you the ability that when you place a token down here, you can actually rough 2 instruments at once. And over here, when you place that, once you're over there, when you place a token down here, you can finish 2 instruments at once, meaning basically you're getting twice the action economy from a single placement. And these spots over here give you +1 to whatever tokens you place here. So if you have +1 from here and +1 plus from here, that's +2. You can start putting your lower value tokens down over here and still get a strong benefit from them. So those are going to be very helpful if you're trying to move up that track over there. Now lastly over here, or I guess lastly, we have down over here, which is going to be a fight for first player. Plus is going to give you either the ability to accomplish a reward. These are specific objectives you have in play that once you accomplish those objectives, you're going to be able to, once you have, for example, let's go over here, if you have 4 of these performances done in the center, you can go ahead and get those 7 points. You can accomplish the reward, but you have to go there, or you can take 6 money, or you can take 2 assistance, and if you place a 4+, you also move up 1 reputation, which will give you a bunch of bonuses, including access to those 2s and those 3s. So that's a lot of things going on, a lot of stuff. But the basic idea is you're trying to gather patrons. The patrons will have various goals that they need done, usually combining instruments, performances, and repairs. Doing all of those together will give you a combination of satisfying your patrons, getting prestige as you go from the items themselves, and getting you locked in for first chair over here. The last thing we'll talk about before we move into review, and there are a lot of things I'm not covering. There's a whole marketplace section. I haven't even talked about that. It's kind of important. I guess I'll briefly talk about it. Once per round, you can, instead of taking an action or resolving a spot, you can simply move your token to the other side and say we're resolving a marketplace action, where you can go here and buy or sell goods, including assistance, including paying 15 money to move up these tracks over here in order to get the various resources you need. That's a big deal because knowing the market, buying and selling as you need, is going to give you a lot of options or access to cheaper cubes in the game than the other way to get them, which is usually placing a worker down here and then pulling it back. Now, back to the spot over here. We were talking about blind bidding, but we haven't fully done anything with it. Let's go ahead and reveal these in order that we saw them. So we have a 3 with 2 assistants, or a 5. We have another 3, and we have another 5. Now the way this plays out, in general, this is actually going to be fairly simple over here, but you always go left to right unless a number is higher. So for example, for the sake of this, let's pretend we had done a 5 over here, just to show you how this plays out over here. Let's place a 5 with 1 assistant. Let's say we had done this. Okay. At this point, what we have is we have a 5 boosted to a 6. We have a 5 over here, and we have a 3 here. This one would go to the front of the line because it's got the higher value. It's going to resolve first. Then you're going to have this one, and then you're going to have this one. In general, when there's a tie, whoever got there first goes earlier. But if not a tie, then you basically resolve it in highest to lowest, and that's going to resolve who takes actions and gets access to the things they want better and faster than the other players. That is probably like 95% of Luthier for you. It is a worker placement blind bidding game, which you're going to place your workers, your discs, onto various spots on the board. The strength of the worker is going to give you bonuses, but also determine who goes first. You are doing it face down, so players don't know exactly what's happening. They just know that you want someone as far as a patron goes. They don't know which patron you want. And then you're trying to be mindful of all the various interweaving parts in terms of what will give you the best bang for your buck, the best action economy as you try to work your way towards victory in Luthier. I feel like I kind of wanted to give you a very brief overview because this game has a lot of things going on, but I ended up doing most of the important bits. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the review. And I think the review will touch upon some things we didn't talk about. But either way, let's go ahead and dive into the review. So, first of all, let's go ahead and start off with ease of play. In general, I thought the rulebook, this, by the way, this I mentioned already, is a prototype. Rules and components subject to change. I know there are things, I believe there are things already being changed, as far as some iconography stuff, some I don't know the full list. I believe some things are already being changed, but this very much is a prototype. That said, as far as prototypes go, the rulebook was fairly straightforward. I mean, it's a lot of information, don't get me wrong. There's a lot to learn here, but it is fairly straightforward. I've read some pretty bad rulebooks and some pretty good rulebooks. I would say I only had one minor complaint in the actual rulebook as far as how things go, and literally it's a nitpick. It's a very straightforward rulebook given the complexity of the game. So good on that front. As far as game length, it might vary, especially depending on player count and how familiar you are with the game. I believe the box says 90 to 120. No, box says 90 to 150. I would say getting it down to 90, I haven't done that yet. I do believe it's definitely possible, especially if you play the game at lower player counts and are familiar with the game. For me, it's definitely been closer to that 2-hour range almost every time I played it. So I'd say, yeah, it's definitely not going to be a short game, but not that overwhelming. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is you want to do everything in this game. You see, everything props you up. Everything helps you for the future. Those patrons, those are going to give you ongoing bonus. When you type those patrons on your board, I mean, look at this patron over here. This patron is going to give me 1 discount every time I rough an instrument. That's going to give me a lot of direction in terms of what I'm going to try to do in the game and how to move forward. And that direction is huge. That direction is going to give me a competitive advantage over the other players. So you can get 2 or 3 patrons up and running. You can have a lot of discounts coming your way. But also you can get discounts from the fact that you'll get those ongoing workers. These workers, the ability to unlock very special workers, That's huge in the game. If your workers are doing everything they're already doing, but more, that's just more for you in the game, and you kind of try to do everything in the game to get those one-time bonuses, those ongoing bonuses. Stock up with 3 patrons so you can start getting rewards every round, but be mindful, because if you lose a patron, it's kind of costly. You don't want to lose your patrons, and if your time runs out and you haven't fulfilled objectives, you will. So everything in the game is going to give you good stuff. You want to do everything, but it all powers you up in small, subtle, slightly different ways. So you're going to be trying to be mindful of that. You're also trying to go for these goals. I didn't talk about this part, but when the game begins, you're going to be given 2 family portraits, which have different abilities, starting bonuses on the back. You're going to be given different patrons to select from, different instruments, and 4 secret goals, of which you're choosing 2. And these will also give you direction and a bunch of points in the game if you're able to get those done. So there's a lot of things that will give you points, a lot of different ways to try to figure out where you're finding those points from, a bunch of early game bonuses you're going to start with that make you start off feeling a bit more powerful. Literally, this little starting bonus over here that you have on the back of the family you choose gives you a good way to start off the game when you feel you got something fun and rewarding, whatever that thing might be, and that already helps you stand out in a crowd, combined with the fact that you start with a patron, you start with an instrument, so you have those core bonuses there, and that's going to help you out as you try to figure out your pathway forward. Evolving your patrons is incredibly satisfying, but it does take a lot of work, and then powering up on these 3 tracks are going to help you a lot. This track over here will help you do so much on this board, but this track over here is going to help you be incredibly powerful at giving strong performances. And this track over here, if you can get to the 2 or the 3 over there, you forget the 3. If you get to the 2 early game, that buys you so much flexibility over the other players that I can't even tell you how much flexibility it buys. The problem is, I just told you 4 different things that are going to be really strong early game, and you kind of have to pick and choose which of those things you're going to focus on because you cannot do it all. Getting higher bonuses for your chips is a big deal. I like the fact that it's not just about who goes first, because frankly, sometimes I care, other times I don't. And so when you don't care, it still matters tremendously, because trying to decide whether you're placing your 5 down over here so you can start moving up this track over here, or whether you're trying to place the 5 down here, because if not, you're going to be the person who's paying 8 to get these resources over here. Those are big deals in the game, and so you're trying to figure out where to place your higher chips and how to get the most reward from them. And as you unlock these unique workers, I don't think I've seen them all yet, but I've seen a bunch of them, and they are incredibly satisfying. These workers over here, they're going to give you just extra stuff, like, hey, by the way, if you have this guy over here, you stop over there, and then suddenly whenever you place one of your guys, you're going up on this track, or I think it's maybe this track. I haven't looked at them all. There's a bunch of things you're going to be getting extra bonuses for that are a big deal, and so there's a lot of fun interweaving elements, and they all do interweave, because to a certain extent, you don't have to do everything in this game. In theory, you can literally just focus on patrons and instruments and never touch the performing and repairing, but doing so is making it harder for yourself, because your patrons often don't need the full goals, they need those secondary goals. So you can kind of choose where to focus your energy and attention in the game while still getting a degree of a little bit of everything, be good at the things you're very good at, while tapping a drop into everything, because it all interweaves beautifully as far as the sheer amount of bonuses, upgrades, and stuff you're going to be getting across the course of a game of Luthier. It is a very satisfying experience, and the market phase, the fact that you can, once per round at any point you can go to the market, trying to time that up, like there are times, like this card's a good example right now, if you have this card in play, which is the highest value for animal parts right now, dropping your 1 down over here to grab 3 animal parts, possibly dropping your 1 and your 2 over there to grab 6 animal parts, and then taking a market turn where you turn around and sell those 6 animal parts for 18 money, and use that to go out and power up another track and get some other bonus. There's a lot of ways to take advantage of even your weaker workers in the game, which is very satisfying. Combine that with the public goals over here and your personal goals over here, and you just have a lot of things that are driving you into how you're going to spend your time in a game of Luthier. Now, as far as things I don't like, there are a bunch of things to go through, although the first 2 or 3 are minor complaints and or nitpicks. The last 2, I think, are the bigger areas for me. The first few are going to be, well, I guess the first one actually might be more of a complaint, which is the neutral player in a 2-player game. You can play this game at 2, 3, or 4 players. You're going to have a reverse side of the board for the 3 and 4 player count, but a 1, 2-player game, you're going to play on this side, and you have this neutral player who's just taking up spots in the orchestra, which is fine. It does the job. I don't know if I love neutral players kind of blocking little rewards and places. I don't find that as satisfying. I'd rather just have I'd rather not deal with a neutral player in the game. Even if the neutral player is not doing anything, there is a solo AI, and you could use the solo as a 3rd player in a 2-player game, but in general, I'd rather just have a clean 2-player game. It's not the end of the world, but a minor nitpick there. I'll also say that the prototype visibility of the chairs is a big deal, meaning going back to this orchestra over here, it is very hard to see things in this game with the way you're placing tokens out, and the way you're placing multiple tokens out, and the way you have to see the names of the instruments, and the way that if you pull things off, you're clearly looking for the name of an instrument. I think that I don't have any good ideas of how to make this better, but the amount this information matters and the way that it's obfuscated in the game through the placement of way too many tokens definitely was not the best. It's not the end of the world because you can move things around, but again, sometimes that will broadcast what your plans are. Are you eyeing that performance? Are you eyeing the repair? Are you putting an instrument to play? And so that kind of obfuscation of really important information definitely wasn't the best. It's not the end of the world, but it certainly got in the way. I'll also say, speaking of potentially prototype issues, I thought this whole element was very confusing as the way this works, including the fact that in the rulebook, I mentioned there are, well, actually I have 2 complaints in the rulebooks, 2 complaints, minor complaints. But over here, your secondary actions on these characters over here, they're very confusing in the way that these actions relate to the actual instrument that you're building or not, because again, it's hard to go into it fully without showing you this, I guess, a ton more detail. But for your secondary actions, you can either build an instrument or repair the instrument or do a performance in relation to that attribute, not that. And that's made more confusing by the fact that the rulebook actually shows a little symbol there that I spent a good 5 minutes trying to find them on the cards before realizing it wasn't what it was doing. It was just telling me how it worked, but doing so with poor iconography in the rulebook. It's not the end of the world, but it certainly felt a little less intuitive. And then you combine that with this low visibility of these icons over here. And again, hopefully some of these are just prototype issues. None of it's really the end of the world. The obfuscation of the first chair was a bigger deal, but none of those are really a big deal, but they certainly are complaints. What I'll say is for bigger complaints for me are, I think 2 actions in the game specifically felt like they were a lot of work, not well, a little complicated. Let's split them up. The first chair in general, getting first chair on this little puzzle here, didn't feel nearly as rewarding as I would have liked relative to the points you get out of it. It felt like a whole lot of work for what feels like a minimal amount of work, considering the fact that sometimes you build a single instrument and you get 9 points, and all this first chair stuff only gives you a handful of points, even if you have a ton of it locked in. The amount of resources you're expending when you repair something to be able to get a placement on first chair, usually those things I felt were only worth it in relation to how they actually helped satisfy a patron's goals, because otherwise the ratio of what you're putting into what you're getting out, including the points at the end of the day, just didn't feel worth it for me. So this whole area control puzzle and the amount of weight the game seems to place on it relative to what you got out of it felt uneven to me. I don't know. I mean, I've read the scoring on it a few times. I think I'm doing it correctly, but if you told me I wasn't doing it correctly, I would buy that, just given how much weight is placed on that versus how it actually manifests in the game itself. The other thing is a different kind of complaint because it's more about the feeling of it, which is building instruments in the game. When you rough an instrument, when you take a bunch of instruments, if you have 2 instruments over here on your sideboard, and you have these like so, and you spend a whole lot of energy, you already ratchet up on this track, and you place a person down, and you pay all those costs, and you move them over, and then nothing happens. Just that's it. Nothing happens. You've done an important step in terms of getting yourself to the point where you can cash in all those bonuses, but roughing an instrument felt like a very large action in terms of the cost of it, but it doesn't feel like it gives you anything in the right now. From a gameplay stance, it's not a feel-good moment. It is an essential moment to get you to the point where you get that payoff, so it's not the end of the world, but it felt like a big action with a lot of expenditure and nothing in the short term in terms of what you benefit from. I'd rather there was some sort of temporary ongoing benefit, and granted you get these benefits here, so you could walk away with a discount, which isn't really a benefit, and you could walk away with 2 inspiration tokens, so you could get some things here, but I would have rather that roughing gives you something, even if that's taken away from the end points on it, just to make the action feel like it has more meaning in the now as opposed to a big cost without a payoff in the current moment. So that's kind of all the stuff I have as far as complaints. Small little nitpicks, some degree of hopefully prototype issues, and then some other stuff that, well, not bad things, but things that did take away a little bit for me. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, this is a very tight game. This is going to fall into one of those games where you have 6 rounds of play, but the amount you get done in rounds 1, 2, and 3 versus the amounts you get done in 4, 5, and 6 is drastically different. You're going to get so much more done because you've built up your engine, you've gathered more workers, you have your advanced workers or patrons in play. You have a lot going for you in this game, and you could get a lot done in those later rounds, but what you get done in rounds 1 and 2 feels very little. It feels like very, very little, and it feels like you're constantly fighting an uphill battle just to keep up with the costs of paying the extra costs for a spot, gathering the materials you need. It feels like you're playing a game of catch-up the first 2 rounds, even though you started with things, so it's a very tight game. You have to know that in the game. It's also blind bidding. That might result in not feel-good moments for you. When you're playing the game and you place down your 5, and somebody places down a 5+1, and you don't even know how it plays out, but you flip the tokens over, and you're like, I placed my 5, and I didn't even get the action that I wanted. I still have to pay extra. It's going to be even more deflating, and this has happened. It can be even more deflating when you have 3 5s in the same space, and that means one of those 5s is not getting what it wants, meaning from the 3 5s, you might not even get the thing you need, so it can be very, very deflating to pay 8 for a character or take the fallback action when you've used your 5. So those kinds of moments will happen. It's in the nature of blind bidding, so you kind of have to be okay with that in the game. And then I'll say that for another non-feel-good moment is getting anything less than the second tier of a performance often feels like a waste. Because you're going for these performances over here, you do want that extra benefit of getting something down over here. Even though it's not a ton of extra stuff, it still matters. And so getting just the performance in itself, I mean, granted, again, you can use it towards your patrons, which I do highly recommend. That's another not feel-good moment. I would have rather that the starting tier had some just lower benefits as opposed to not even getting a placement, because it feels like there's a whole luck element wrapped into the game. And depending on the cards, you may not be able to get the end result you want. Some have lower thresholds, some have higher thresholds, but that definitely means there are times in the game where you'll do a performance and not get what you want, and especially early game, that's just a deflating moment in the game. As far as final thoughts on Luthier, this has been a lot of information, a lot to go through, and honestly, to play the game, you still probably need a bit more, because I gave you an overview at a rapid-fire clip, but there's a lot of things going on in this game. Luthier is a very satisfying Euro experience. It's a beautifully illustrated game. Vincent Dutrait, from Pavison Games, who have done Distilled, which was very well received. Everything here fits together very well. It feels like a classic Euro game in the sense, in the way everything's a little tight. It's not going to be a more heavy midweight Euro. It's it feels very akin to the Italian designers Euros, Coimbras, Lorenzo, Gollum, all those games in terms of the feel that you get from this experience, in terms of the intricacy of the way everything works together, the tightness of the economy of the game, the way it opens up, but only in the last few rounds do you really start to feel your engines moving, but also that's where the game comes to a close. It kind of has all those things work together in a very unique theme, a very beautiful presentation, and an overall good package. That said, the tricky part is these kinds of games, I find when I'm covering these games, it's always hard for me because I'm always weighing them up against each other, specifically because I only have so much game time, and which type of these games do I pull off the shelf is always hard to decide, and a lot of it comes down to the small edges of what does something best versus what's something really well. To me, Luthier is a very solid game. It's a 4 out of 5 for me. I like it a lot, but a lot of the things together, it still has that tightness. This could well be a 5 out of 5 for you. This is one of those games, if you're weighing up these mid-weight Euros or mid to heavyweight Euros, there's a lot of intricate moments that really come together beautifully. I think it's a very satisfying experience, make no mistake. I think the thing for me with these overwhelming Euros, I think the thing for me is just, what did one do to stand out versus another? At the end of the day, Luthier looks beautiful, has a unique theme, plays incredibly well, and I definitely very much enjoyed this one. I don't know if it quite hit the magic that I have from some Euros, but if you're looking for a well-designed, put-together, beautiful game, this one to me is a solid game. It's a 4 out of 5, Luthier from Pavison Games. As far as other game recommendations, I do feel to a large extent this felt actually very similar to Gollum for me. Gollum is another one of these big, everything feels tight, everything feels overwhelming, but as you build up your engine, it becomes more and more satisfying as you go. This kind of felt very similar in the arc the game played. I don't have a good reason as to why, but that's the first one that came to mind. And then similarly, there's Lorenzo Magnifico, another game that gives you a lot of different levers to push, 4 different card rows to manage, but in a very different way that you're trying to execute on those, and also trying to deal with the worker placement and the tokens and the bumping of the tokens. A lot of similarities to Lorenzo in terms of the feel that the game gave me overall. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.